Hey everybody, my name is Lucas, and in this video we're going to take a look at HubSpot and see if we can make it work as a personal productivity system for the getting things done methodology, or GTD for short. Now, I've been using HubSpot for many years and I've been utilizing GTD for many years, but I've never used them in conjunction, and that's for a good reason. That's because HubSpot is not made as a task manager or a productivity system as such. HubSpot is a CRM, which is a different category of software than tools like Todoist or note-taking tools like Evernote, which we've reviewed on this channel before. A CRM is made for maintaining relationships with customers if you're a business or if you're a salesperson or a marketeer and speaking to certain customer segments. That's also why you can see that the first option on the top left here has everything to do with contacts, conversations via chat, marketing options, sales-specific options. So you might be thinking, why even bother? Obviously, this isn't a system for GTD or productivity. Well, I just thought it would be fun to see how far we can go, given that I've used both of these, the methodology and the software for many years in different use cases. And I know my way around HubSpot pretty well. So today we're going to take a look at the free version, which is something we'll have to emphasize a couple of times because the free version is great, but it does have significant limitations. And there are also paid versions which would actually make it pretty damn good for a GTD system. However, you would also be eating away at your wallet much more than any other productivity tool would do to you. So we're not even going to consider that for this video, but know that it's available if you are willing to pay for it. So what are we going to look at today? We're not going to look at everything, like every option at all, because like I said, they're not all relevant. We're going to take a look at contacts, companies. We're going to take a look at tasks under sales. We're going to take a look at deals, and we're going to take a look at snippets. And those features combined can get you pretty close to a working GTD system. We're also going to take a look at documents, by the way. But let's get started with the most important part, which is the task management side of things. So like I said, HubSpot is designed as a system to help you talk to people effectively if you are in a sales or marketing role. Now, in these conversations, in these outreaches with other people, there are obviously tasks involved, but HubSpot is not a system that puts those at the center of things. They more so serve a function of helping you manage a large load of conversations every working day. That's not to say, though, that you're not free to use it in a different way, and that's actually what we're going to take a look at here. So from the tasks section, you can see that there are these several tabs here. These are called queues. And you can create any amount and any type of queue as you see fit. You just give them a name, and then that's the function they serve. So in our case, what we've done is create a queue for the inbox, in which you can drop any item and you still name it a task, but it doesn't have to be a task. So when we create a task, we are prompted with a menu on the right, and we can give it a title. So just drop any idea or whatever it is that you want to process here. Second, you can select a type. Now, this is where the CRM side of HubSpot really comes at the forefront, because if it's designed for talking to people in a business context, well, what are you going to see? Obviously, you're going to see to either select a call or an email, because those are most utilized in a business setting. However, in our case, we're just going to stick with to-dos. You can give it a normal or high priority, and you can associate it with records. Now, this is a very interesting one, because in HubSpot, these are deals. So those are basically a potential transaction with a potential customer. And those deals live in a pipeline. We're going to look at that in just a second. They can also be people. So those are contacts. And they can also be companies. These are all separate records that we're going to take a look at in just a moment. And you can associate a task with such a record. For now, though, we're going to just pretend that it's a standalone task. In fact, it's just an inbox item, so we don't have to do as much processing here. Assigned to, this is by default you yourself. And if you're the only user of the system, that's always going to be you. So no need to change this. No need to change this either because we're in this queue already. So this is where this item will live for now. And this is where actually one of the major shortcomings of HubSpot for a personal productivity context comes into play, in my opinion. The reason is that you have to select a due date for every single task, every single item here that lives within the system. And again, from a business perspective, this is understandable because in that case, these tasks represent commitments that you've made with other people in a business setting. Yeah, I'm just going to send you over the quote tomorrow, or I'm going to give you a call in 3 days. You want to follow up on those promises, and that's why it's normal to have due dates. However, for a GTD system, you might not have a urgent due date for every single task, right? So what you can do to make sure it doesn't clutter your overdue list here or remind you when that day has come, even though that's just an arbitrary date, set it far away in the future. Let's do it in, I don't know, end of 2022. So I'm recording this as of April 2021. So that's a significant amount of time. We can be pretty sure that I'll have processed it by then, right? So no reminders, and you can also select the notes to further elaborate on the idea or item that you want to process here. We press create, and there we go. Once we refresh, we just saw it in there, but it seemed to disappear for a moment. But here it is. Now it lives inside of the inbox queue, which has one item. So what about items that we've processed? Where do they go? That's where these three separate queues come into play. Obviously, we have next actions. This is probably the most important list, and it tells you what are things you can do now, depending on where you are, to move forward with a particular project or things that you've just committed to yourself that you want to do. In this case, this queue has a particular view, and by that I mean that it has particular columns. In this case, the columns are title, notes, priority, due dates, and associations. Now, we went through what these mean before, but here you can start to see how that actually works out in practice. You can see that this is a task that has a clear definition. It also has a context defined for it under notes, and it has an association with a particular project, which is to complete the statistics exam. We'll have a look at what that is exactly in just a moment as well. So now that we can see that there are tasks with a context, that means we can start actually engaging with these items depending on where we are. But it would be even better if we could filter for them. Now we can sort them, which is good, but filtering means actually selecting items in a context that is the same context in which you are now. So how do we do that? There is a more filters option here, but it doesn't allow us to filter for any particular value that is present in notes. It can be a task type, which we've gone over before, not very relevant in most cases, due dates, creation dates, or priority. Well, that's it. So how does it work? Well, you can actually search, and in that case, it will boot up any result with that particular string. So if we search home, we see that only the tasks with the context home remain. Now, this context here is put in manually in one sense, but if you do it manually, purely manually, I should say, by typing, you risk mistyping and missing certain actions by searching for them, right? So how do we get around that? If you remember when we were creating the idea task, there was an option at the bottom that said notes. So this is where that context lives. And how do we put it there? That's where a feature called snippets comes into play. Under conversations, you can go to the snippets menu and create certain strings of text that will be typed for you by entering a shortcut. You can access these shortcuts by pressing this snippet icon at the bottom here. And you will see that you can see that I've created a couple of snippets to just present a certain string of text, like context home. And there we go. It's inside of the notes, pre-typed, no risk of misspelling it. You can also access these snippets by pressing the hashtag symbol and then typing the shortcut, and you will see here it's also booted up. That way you can process an item from inbox to next action and give it a particular context. And that's what we had done with the next actions already present. And by searching for the name of the context, we found it. So that's where you can actually get pretty close to a functioning system for GTD that works from context. Have you completed an item? Well, great. You can mark it complete and it will automatically be removed from this queue and placed inside of the completed queue here. And that's important because you don't want items to just live here while they've already been finished. So you can mark them off pretty easily and just continue with whatever is next. Tickler file, pretty self-explanatory. You can give yourself reminders on certain actions and they live within this queue. Now you have to do this manually, like I said, but it is pretty easy to do by following the instructions that we just went over. In this case, this item has a particular reminder set under task reminders for the due date. So here's where we actually use the due date. However, it's not a task we have to perform by then per se. It's just a reminder we'll want to receive then. And by setting the reminder for the due time, that's exactly what we're going to get. Someday maybe, also pretty self-explanatory. Any task item that you might want to process at some point in the future, you just drop them in here, and then we can actually do that here by selecting the task, changing the queue, selecting someday maybe, saving it, and now we should see again after refreshing it probably living in there. Interestingly, it's not showing up. Maybe if we try one more time. There it is. So you can see that it's not very snippy, not as fast because it's web-based. Maybe, I don't know what the reason is, but it doesn't work great. But after a few tries, we got it at least. And again, the due date is far in the future so that we don't get a someday maybe item presenting itself as overdue at a given time. That's what we want to avoid for sure. So that's the tasks overview and its queues and how to use them. So you saw that these items have particular associations. You saw that there's a project here. So where do we find a list of our projects and how do we create them? That's actually where we really start deviating from how HubSpot is intended to be used and actually go to deals. Now, if you remember what deals are for, these are transactions, potential transactions for potential customers. So HubSpot works with a pipeline, and if you're not familiar with that, it's basically a way to visualize a customer journey from being a total stranger to being your new customer. And there are certain action steps involved along that journey, like getting your first conversation with them, sending over a quote, and maybe having them sign the contract. And you can visualize those into stages that go from left to right until they end up at the right side, which is completed or one deal in HubSpot terminology. But the good thing is we can actually hack these pipelines, edit them to make them work for a GTD system. And in this case, we're just going to use these deals as particular projects. And projects are deal records in HubSpot, but it actually works pretty well as a project record as well. So here we just have one pipeline with one stage here that will be filled up from top to bottom with any new project we add to it by creating a deal. And once the project is complete, we can move it there to indicate it's complete, and it will no longer clutter our view of active projects at the very moment. So how do we create a deal? How do we create a project? That's by just pressing the button, and we can enter a title. The deal stage is projects, but you can also choose to divide these stages into multiple areas of focus or goals that a project might be related to. There's not many limitations there, even with the free version, as long as it's within the same pipeline. There's an option to select the area of focus that the project is related to, is a drop-down option, and the goal as well. So this is another way to do it, and it's actually the way I've decided to do it. But again, you can also use separate stages for separate goals. There's a close date, and the close date is just another sales term. This is basically the anticipated deadline for the project, and you can always change this later on. So no worries there. You can associate the project with particular companies or particular people. And we're going to take a look at an example of how that works. Line items, you can ignore these because this is a feature that's not available in the free version anyways. It's just there to kind of entice you to purchase a paid version of HubSpot, and it's not relevant for GTD purposes. So here we can take a look at a project we've already created. And the project is titled Complete Statistics Exam. So imagine that we're students and we're following a statistics course. One of the projects that is related to that course is to actually complete the exam. And let's say the exam takes place on May 11th. That's why we've set the close date for May 11th in the close date section. So that's kind of the deadline for the project. That's when the project is going to be finished either way. I'm going to do it, and all I can do is prepare as best as I can to get a good grade for that exam. So how do we do that? That's where these tasks come into play that we already saw from the task view. So from the project view here, you can create tasks, and we can see that we've already done so. And in this case, it doesn't matter which task we perform first or second. All of these, like study the class notes, study the book summary, and perform exercises from a workbook, they're all relevant in helping you achieve this goal. But it's up to you to set any potential due dates. I don't like doing that. I like to work from context, and so the due date for every task is just the same as that for the project. But you have the freedom here to change that. As long as you put the Q in next actions, you will have this task appear as a next action from your task view, which is what we want. And you can see on the left-hand side here, again, that the area of focus and the goal it's related to is present. So it's in the education area of focus, and it's part of a goal that I have to earn a master's degree by the end of this study year, by the semester, whatever. Now, interestingly, we're not done yet with the project view. So normally this is a deal view, which on the left has things like the amount, so the value of the transaction, and many other properties that we've removed. So make sure you pause the video and add these to your particular view, which I'll go over in a moment how to do that, so to have the same setup. On the right-hand side, we see associations of this project with particular other taxonomies in HubSpot. One of them being the contacts. So this is interesting because this is basically a list of people in your life, so to speak. And to go to a list of every contact registered in your system, you can just go to contacts. And here you can see that we've already created one that was also linked to the project, and it's just called My Professor. So let's imagine this is my statistics professor. You can see that they have a statistics at harvard.edu email address. So I'm studying at Harvard. And through creating this contact with this harvard.edu email handle, the company was also automatically created. And we'll go through a use case for companies in just a moment. But just to recap for the contact level, you can also see ways to reach them if I need to with the phone number. All of these are standard contact properties inside of HubSpot, and all you have to do is fill it out and organize it. Here's where we actually go into another section of GTD, which is agendas and waiting for. Agendas are talking points you might have with a certain person once you see them, once you meet them. So any questions or ideas you want to drop by them. This is simply a note that I made and pinned it to the contact record as such. I can create the note here, type what I need to type, save it. And now we can also set the associations, and we can be careful to select either just the contact or potentially even a project that that note is related to as well. In this case, it's just for the contact. So we're just going to create that association, and then we can actually pin it under actions. And that's what I did here with the agenda. And I'm waiting for, well, I might be waiting for the exam grade for this professor at some point in time. And that's where also you saw under the tickler file that once I've received the grade, I will be reminded to evaluate whether I want to do a resit. Maybe I got a bad grade, I need to do it anyway. Maybe I got a good grade, but I want to get an even better one. That's a perfect item for the tickler file, which is why it lives here with a due date 1 week after the exam, because that's when I expect the result, right? So now you can hopefully start to see how this can work for you in practice as well, if you decide to work with HubSpot in this way. Cool. Now we need to go into a bit more of the back end of HubSpot, because you've seen the contact record, you've seen the project record, you've seen what we see here with when we create a contact, what can we enter to create it? How does that work? How do we make that those particular options appear and not other ones. That's where we have to go into settings. So bear with me as we go there, and pause the video as needed to duplicate what I've done here, or feel free to create your own system. Once we go to settings, we need to go to properties. And from here, we can see every property that's already in the system by default. And you can see that by navigating to this column, and you see these are created by HubSpot. You cannot delete them. And most of them are not relevant. Again, that's for sales or marketing purposes. So how do we find those that we've created and find the relevancy of them? Here's what I did. So you remember with the project, in other words, the deal, you saw the area of focus and related goal property. I just created it on the right-hand side by pressing Create Property. And you will see this menu here. First, you can create the name and an internal description. What area of focus is this project related to, right? Then you go to Field Type and you select Drop Down Select. And from there, you can create, edit, remove whatever your relevant options. And this is good because your areas of focus might change over time, just as your goals might change over time. And goals are set up in exactly the same way. Here we go, under goal, just a drop-down select option with the goals that I've defined as such. So how do we make those appear on both the prompt that we get when creating these projects, as well as seeing them on the left-hand side of the project once we're in that view, because that's not the default setting, and it's important that you make sure to set that properly. That's where you can actually go to Objects and then Contacts and Companies. And from here you can see these options. Set the properties your team sees on contact records, for example. Set the properties all your users in your account see when creating contacts. Now this is an example of one that I edited. So you can select all these properties again to prompt when you create it, but I just want to keep it simple. Email, first name, last name, that's it. And that's now what we see when creating a new contact. Same goes for deals. Here's where we made some significant adjustments. So what do we see when creating a deal? Well, that's what you just saw already. We see the area focus property that we created and the goal and a potential due date that we might want to fill out. But we've removed things like the amounts because it's not a transaction anymore. Here's also where you can set up the pipeline that we've created. So by default, this is a sales pipeline with specific sales stages. But here we just created the projects stage and the completed stage. Win probability you can ignore. That has to do with the probability to win a deal. Again, sales stuff, not for personal productivity per se. But you can also decide potentially to add another deal stage if you want to add projects of a particular category and organize it that way. That's up to you. That's what you can do from here. But know that within the free version, you are limited to one pipeline. So make sure you choose carefully how to configure it. Okay, cool. That's, I believe, almost it when it comes to HubSpot. So we've gone over contacts, which we use for agendas and waiting for. By the way, if we want to get an overview of our agendas, we can search for them by typing agenda. And you can see here that there was one note found on my professor, but it will also display further agendas if you formatted them as such on the contact record. Important to note as well that with snippets, you are limited to 5 snippets in the free version. So that's 5 contacts basically, unless you decide to manually input them, which is possible but risky. Just be aware of that if you do decide to go with this system. Lastly, we're going to look at reference and see how that works. So that's where we go to sales again and to documents, because here you can upload documents and organize them in particular folders. Again, though, you can see that there's this strict limit of only 5 documents. So it's not going to work out in practice unless you do decide to upgrade to Sales Hub Starter, for example. Just know that information can live here. So if you want to have a comprehensive system for all that stuff, it can be in here. Regardless, though, there's also project support material, which I've forgotten to show you here, and it's going to be the last thing I'm going to show in this case. And it's on the right-hand side you can add attachments, like in this case, maybe a workbook PDF or something. So in that case, just select add and upload new, and it will be uploaded as an attachment to the project. Now you will have noticed that there are some limitations here, and it doesn't stop there, because when it comes to sequential tasks, projects with sequential tasks, that's going to be really difficult to do automatically, because you would need an automation feature for that called sequences, and that's only available from the professional level, which is even more expensive. So I'm not going to even bother to go into that. It's possible if you have the money for it, but why bother, because there are other tools that allow this functionality as well. So all in all, a system that actually surprises me in how suitable it is for GTD. I expected much less, so this was a fun exercise for me to perform, if anything, hopefully for you to watch as well. So my verdict when it comes to GTD and HubSpot is you can make it work if you drastically reinterpret what it means to create a deal and what a task means and all that stuff. And I would say you could make it work for you if you already use it for your business. If you already have an upgraded account with more features like automations where you can create sequential projects, etc. And then have a personal pipeline in addition to your business pipelines to organize your projects and tasks and put those into queues, etc. That's the use case I can envision for HubSpot with GTD. Other than that, probably not worth going into this just for personal productivity. There are other systems out there that do that job a lot better. Nonetheless, it was a lot of fun to do this, and I hope it was a lot of fun for you to watch it as well. Stay tuned and subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. I'm going to upload a lot more GTD related content. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.